Okay. So today we will be discussing about classical Marxism and little bit about recapitulation about the last class. We have discussed a little bit about the life. He was a Jew born in Germany, influenced by philosophy of Hegel, and then he became a friend with angels, and then he migrated first to France and then later to England. And in England, he stayed for the rest of his life. And he wrote number of books and gave a very thorough theorization or thorough grounding to the theory of communism. And he wrote a couple of books with angels and a couple of books he wrote on his own. The very famous is being the Das Capital, and in fact, his work, Karl Marx's work, became popular after his death. Throughout his life, this person had lived a life of poverty and died in poverty. So that is the book that is the Holy Family, Poverty of Philosophy, and then Das Kapital, Communist Manifesto. These are the important work of his. And through this work, we can understand what he thought about the economic system, how economic system should be, or the how society should be governed, and all that thoughts collectively are known as Marxism. And this Marxist thought has influenced the knowledge creation all across the world for decades together. Indian history writing is also influenced by Marx significantly, and today we will try to understand what are the important philosophical ideas about the governance, about the economical system, about the social relationship that Marx has given. So, his that is called classical Marxism. Later on, people have made certain changes to the Marxist ideology, and that came to be known as the neo-Marxism. But today we will be confining mostly to understand classical Marxism, that is trying to understand the Marx idea. And these his ideas, his philosophy can be basically divided into the three subheadings, that is historical materialism, conflict model of society, and philosophy of scientific socialism. And we'll be taking that one by one. So historical materialism is also known as materialistic interpretation of history. It is also known as economic determinism. It is also known as dialectical materialism. Don't get confused if you get a question like what is the materialistic interpretation? It means it is a historical materialism. That means it is a dialectical materialism. What does this historical materialism tries to tell us is that behind all the historical event, there is an economic reason. So it is an economy which is a main determining factor behind history. Behind the every human action, the motivation is material gain. That is what Marx tries to tell us. And what bring phenomenal changes in the society is the changes in the mode of production. How does this happen? I'll be explaining to you after some time, but just to go ahead and give you a kind of the ideas in the seed form. So the basis of all human action is a process of production. Whenever the process of production changes, that brings fundamental changes in the human life. For example, see, this is a cycle. In this cycle, I hope you are able to see this. In the primitive system, in the primitive society, our ancestors, they mostly lived on food gathering and hunting. Their main occupation was to gather food and to hunt for the food. And in this primitive communism, as the food that is this stage, Karl Marx call it as a primitive communism. Communism is a word which originated from the word common. That means whatever is produced used to belong to the common people, everybody. It was a common ownership. The very simple reason is that the food that is gathered from the forest, either by the food gathering or by hunting, cannot be stored. There cannot be surplus. It will get rotten, like fruits and the flesh of the animal that is hunted. And that is the reason it was distributed among the community. People went for hunting. Some people took care of the children and women, and after hunting or after food gathering, whatever was brought was divided among the people. That is how the Karl Marx assume. Nobody has seen that life, but that is how the Karl Marx presume studies or interpret the ancient life of the ancient people. So during this stage of primitive communism, the food that was gathered or food that was earned, we can say, cannot be stored, and there was no surplus, no extra food, and that was distributed among the community. And as the people were mostly engaged in the food production, there was hardly any time for the development of any other kind of civilization. But later on, there was a discovery of agriculture. The people who used to live on hunting and food gathering started cultivating agriculture. Now, agriculture is an activity where you can work seasonally, like during the sowing season or during the harvesting season. You can sow the seed and you can harvest the crop, but rest of the time you are generally free. And the second advantage is that whatever is produced during the by cultivation can be stored, and with some effort you can produce food much more than what you require. So this is called surplus. Surplus is something that is extra than what is required for the survival. Now, as this primitive communism has given way to agriculture, it has brought fundamental changes in the human civilization. You see here the mode of production, which was food gathering and hunting earlier, has now changed to agriculture. Now, with the coming of the agriculture, people started settling down around surrounding their agriculture land. The villages have come into existence. As now the food was adequate, there was spare time, and the people started developing civilization. They started developing art. They started constructing better houses. Now, the the main catalyst or the main factor that has brought these changes in the human civilization is change in the mode of production. The earlier the food that was gathered by the food gathering or that was gathered by hunting in the forest is now begin to be produced by the cultivation, and that cultivation has brought fundamental changes. So you see here what Marx is trying to understand or trying to tell us is that what brings changes in the human civilization or in the human life is basically a changes in the mode of production. As the mode of production, which was food gathering and hunting earlier, has now changed to agriculture, it has led to the development of civilization, development of culture, art, development of better houses. Political system has changed. Now the people, they started living in villages, so they elected somebody as their leader, and the leader gradually became the king. Now, from small villages, now we have the bigger towns and bigger cities and the bigger kingdom, and even the empire came into existence. So it is that agriculture which is a fundamental basis, which is a fundamental foundation behind the development of everything else. So here you see base and superstructure relationship that I will tell you later on, but I think it will become more clear to you if I tell you now. So base is what? Base is an economy. Base is change in the mode of production, and this base has led to the changes in many things. That is what is called superstructure by the in the Marxist theorization. Superstructure is your political system, your art, architecture, your society. This is all superstructure. Your literature also later on. So this superstructure is determined by the changes in the base. That is economical changes. That is changes that came in the mode of production. I hope it is clear here. Now, as now the agriculture became a little bit, more accepted form of food production. In agriculture, there is a possibility of having surplus. You can produce and store that food for a longer period. You can produce more than that is required. And that store food, which is called surplus, something that is more than required for your survival, you can sell it. Of course, selling in exchange of money came much later, but you can sell it under the barter system. Now, as people are able to hoard it, store it, and sell it, the greed developed, and it is out of that greed, it is out of the desire to have more and more surplus, people now started thinking about how can we cultivate the land more. A small group of people have a limitation to work, so now the war have started. Earlier also there were, but now the war became more intense, because now during the war you can defeat the people, enslave them, and compel them to work for you on your agricultural land, and in return of that you can just give them bare minimum food that is required for the survival. You can become now the owner of the land. Ask your slave to work more, maybe 12 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours in a day. Out of that 12 hours, 15 hours of work, your slave may produce more food, more output, but out of that output, maybe 20% or 30% you are giving to the person, to your slave, and rest of the thing you are keeping it with you. And that is how the system of slavery has came into existence after the discovery of agriculture. That is what Marx has tried to say. Marx is trying to say. So, this primitive communism has gradually led to the stage of a system which is called slavery. In this primitive communism stage, there was no slavery as such. But in the case after the discovery of agriculture, the social structure, the political structure, everything has changed, and now the system of slavery has come into existence. And now here onward, with the agriculture and with the slavery, the society begin to be divided into the two classes, have and have nots. The owner of the land, they were have. They had agriculture land. They own slaves. And the slave who toil on the agriculture land, work for them, were have nots. So here the class struggle have started. Obviously, if a slave is made to work for 15 hours a day, but most of the food that is produced by him is taken by the owner of the land, the slave is bound to resent it. And the owner of the land will try his best to give minimum possible food to the slave, minimum possible production to the slave, and take maximum work. So here the conflict have started. And from here onwards, the conflict continues at the different stages of life. And that is what Karl Marx called it as a conflict model of society. At every place now he sees there is a conflict, there is a class struggle, there are people who are have and have nots. And here in this conflict, he also uses Hegel's theorization about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Hegel used it in the case of ideas. Marx uses it in the case of changes in the mode of production. In the case of primitive communism, food gathering and hunting as an accepted means, accepted mode of production was accepted thesis. Now that is challenged by the new system, and that is being replaced by the system of slavery and ownership of land. So agriculture was an antithesis for the food gathering, and out of that the synthesis have come, that is this agriculture and slavery, along with some people they continue to have food gathering and hunting. That is how the society have changed now. Now this slavery has, as I have already referred to, slavery, agriculture led to the establishment of kingdom first and then the empire, and that is how the system of feudalism has come into existence. The essential economical understanding or the economical setup in the feudalism is that king, he divides land to his supporters, to his nobles, zamindars, landlords, and the landlord give it to the serf, the people who work on the agriculture land, and in return of their work they are given certain percentage of the production, but the major part of the production is taken by the landlord, and out of that production, certain part is given to the king. The landlord is also under obligation to serve the king with his forces whenever there is a war. So this is called system of feudalism. So we have king now, we have feudal lords or zamindar, and then we have serf. So here king and zamindar, they are have, and the serf who work, or the peasant who work on the agricultural land, are have not. But here also we see the class conflict. The serf will have an intention to take maximum production, and the zamindar will have to give him bare minimum. Out of the production that is taken from the serf, zamindar will tend to take maximum possible and give minimum possible to king, but the king will have a tendency to extract maximum from zamindar. So here again Karl Marx see that there is a class conflict. Of course, he categorizes the nobility and the king into the one category, that is have, and the serf as have not. Now with the agriculture, now till feudalism, agriculture was the main basis of the economy. But now after the industrial revolution, large number of industries begin to be built up. People started investing in industries, and the system of capitalism has come into existence. Now the person who is having more money, he will set up a factory. Now in the earlier case, feudalism or the feudal lord, they had major say in the administration. They control the king, they control the rule making, they control the law making institutions. But with the capitalism coming into existence, here again Marx sees a conflict. Now the capitalist, the owner of the industries, they wanted more power in the law making. They wanted that rules and regulations should be made in such a way that it favors the capitalist. It enables them to exploit the masses. It enables them to exploit the laborers. And the conflict continues. Capitalist or the capitalist system, they replaced the earlier feudal system. Some of the feudal lord, of course, who were very clever, they invested their money in the factories and they became the new capitalists. But in the urban area now, the new capitalist class has come into existence. They replace the hegemony of the feudal lord over the lawmaking institutions. They became more influential in the lawmaking, and then they continue to exploit the labor. Now, with the industrialization, with the mechanization of agriculture, a lot of laborers in Europe, they were replaced by the machine. Now, with the coming of the machine in agriculture, work of 10 men can be done by 1 or 2 men by using machinery, and now 7 to 8% out of 10 has become unemployed in the rural area, and they migrated to cities. And this migrated landless laborer became cheap labor available for the upcoming factories. And the upcoming factory owners, they exploited this unemployed labor, gave them minimum bare possible wages, make them to work for 15 hours in a day without holiday. They had a very unhygienic condition, no sanitation, lack of drinking water facility. And it was during this situation that Karl Marx has studied in England, and he saw the very bad effect that the capitalism is having on the masses. The exploitation of women, the exploitation of children. P.V. Shelley is one of the very famous poets, and he has written a poem. You know what used to happen? The factories, they used to have chimneys, and through that chimneys, the smoke used to be, released in the atmosphere. And that chimney is having a tapering shape. So that chimney, the carbon inside the chimney over a period of time will get deposited, and slowly the flow of the smoke will be, it will be obstructed. The smoke will not flow as easily as it should be when the chimney is clean. Now that chimney needs to be clean. Now as that chimney is having a tapering shape, a grown-up person, it becomes very difficult for a grown-up person to go right up to the top because of his body shape, body mass. So for the cleaning of the chimney, the children were utilized. Children of this laborer, they were paid some money. And in one of the incident, a child who climbed upward and he wanted to please his master, he climbed upward and he got stuck in that chimney and unfortunately died. That was a very pathetic incident. A child died, and P.B. Shelley has written a very heart-touching poem when he came to know about that episode. Anyway, I'm just trying to explain how the capitalism as an exploitative system, uh, how inhuman it can be. And that is what the Marx says. Well, now I hope you understood how the system have changed from the primitive communism to slavery. You understood the concept of surplus, how it has given way to feudalism, and it is this surplus, according to Marx, is a main culprit which inflames the greed and which makes the people to produce more and more surplus and to keep the major portion of that surplus and give minimum possible wages to the people who are exploited, to the people who are have nots. Now here, according to Marx, this in the capitalist system, the workers and the laborers, they will gradually realize that they are being exploited. There will be a spread of awareness, and it's out of that awareness and realization of their exploitation that these workers will be uniting one day. And these united workers will bring the revolution. And after that revolution, the factories will not be owned by an individual factory owner, but it will be owned by the common people. And that is what the communism tells us. That the factor of production, that is labor, capital and land, is not owned by any individual, but they are owned by the society. The society, it will be a common ownership of the society over this factor of production. So for example, if you have a talent, that means you have a labor. You are not going to utilize your labor only for yourself, but you are going to utilize this for the society. The land will be used for the society. The factory production will be used by the society. Production will be done in such a way so that the need of the people can be met. And that is what is he called as a scientific socialism. It is not a primitive communism now, primitive communism of the earlier stage. So he sees the cycle here. The primitive communism gave way to slavery, it gave way to feudalism, it gave way to capitalism, and now after the revolution, what will come into existence is a scientific socialism. That is what he says. All right. This is also called economic determinism. What he says here, that it is an changes in the factor of production, changes in the system of production that brings changes in everything else. Now, in this scientific socialism, system of scientific socialism, which will come after the revolution, there will be hardly any role for the state machinery. By studying the slavery, feudalism and capitalism, Karl Marx theorizes that the state that we have, state includes everything, our police system, our judiciary, our educational institute, our government offices. These are the apparatus of the state through which the state functions. According to Karl Marx, in the feudalist or in the capitalist society, the state machinery is designed in such a way so that it maintains the status quo. It protects the interest of the affluent class. It protects the interest of the have. We need more police because the wealth and property of the affluent classes need to be protected. That is what Marx says. In this system, in this government machinery, the have-not or the exploited class doesn't have much role to play. But in this system, the scientific socialism, there will be an equality. There will be no high and low. Nobody will be very rich, nobody will be very poor. So in that case, there will be no need of state. According to Karl Marx, the crime and the dacoity is happening because some people are having a lot of wealth and some people doesn't have wealth. Now, if everybody is at an equal level, probably there will be no crime, and we will not be needing so much of state machinery. And that is why he says that The state will wither away. In scientific communism, there will be no need of state. That is another of his theorization. Next, one more theorization in relation to this cycle and the gradual evolution of the society and his prediction of the coming of the scientific socialism is that his theorization about social Darwinism. Like we have seen that there is a conflict everywhere. People want more and more share, they want more and more profit, and they come in conflict. There is a class conflict. Now, Darwin was a biologist, a scientist, who, through his study in his book Origin of the Species, has given a theory that in the nature there is an always conflict between the living species, and it is the living species who are very, very clever, they survive. For example, the herbivorous animal, they live at the cost of the plants. Plants do have life, but if the herbivorous has to survive, it has to eat the plants, and the plant has to be killed. The carnivorous animal has to eat the herbivorous animal, and the omnivorous animal eat both. So, in the nature, for the survival, the struggle and conflict is an inevitable part of the survival. That is what Darwin tells us. And Karl Marx, he extends this Darwinism. This is called Darwinism, Darwin's theory. He extends this Darwinism to the human society, rephrases it as social Darwinism. That means in the human society, in order to go ahead, in order to monopolize the resources, in order to take the maximum profit, there is an always conflict. We see conflict here between the slaves and master. We see conflict here between the serf, feudal lords and the king. We see the conflict here from between the feudal lord and the capitalism on the one side, and between the capitalism and the workers on the other side. Here, when the capitalism reaches to the very high stage, the revolution will come and there will be a conflict between, obviously, between the workers and the capitalists. So at every stage of the growth, every stage of the society, development of the society, there is a conflict which Karl Marx call it as a social Darwinism. And he says that it is only in the scientific communism or the scientific socialism that there will be no more any conflict. People will have equal wealth, people will have equal status, there will be no high and low, and there will be no conflict. I hope this is clear. It was very important to understand this, because unless you understand this, there will be, you will not understand the classical Marxism properly. So in a nutshell, it is, according to Marx, it was a primitive communism earlier. No high and low, there is no sense of ownership of the land, there is no economic classes, and there was no class struggle. Due to the discovery of agriculture, the stage of slavery came. Now we have people who are the owner of the land, they were enslaving others, making them to work and taking maximum surplus. This agriculture and slavery has given way to feudalism, where we have king, feudal lords, and the serf. And feudalism, after the coming of industrial revolution, has given way to capitalism, where again we find that during this transition phase, there was a struggle between the capitalism and the feudal lords. New capitalists, they wanted more power, and the conflict between the capitalist class and the worker class, it still continues according to Marx, according to Marxist theory, and it will continue till the time there will be a revolution and the scientific socialism has come into existence all over the world. According to Marx theorization or Marx prediction, the workers all over the world will realize their exploitation, they will unite together, they will not believe that their government is taking care of them. It is the worker of other country who are their real comrades, and they will overthrow the government. The government, existing government, is there for the protection of the right of the bourgeois class. He call it bourgeois. That means the capitalists, the money-minded people, and that government will be overthrown, and there will be the there initially there will be kind of dictatorship. dictatorship of the proletariat. Proletariat means common people. But then later on, the scientific socialism will come into existence all over the world. And until unless it has come into existence all over the world, the system of exploitation will not stop. So this is the main basis of the communist, the Marxist thought. Now, what I'm going to explain to you further is mainly based on this thing. The crux of the Marxist theory. I have already told you. In case you are having any doubt, you can ask me or put your question in the chat box, and I'll continue further with. So this conflict model of class struggle, I have already explained to you that there is a conflict and development, it goes together. He also gave theorization about the social Darwinism. History is full of class struggle. That is what he writes in his very famous Communist Manifesto. Marx and Hegel, they had certain differences. Hegel said that there is a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis in the case of the ideas. Karl Marx says that thesis, antithesis, and synthesis is in the case of the economy. So this progress is called dialectics. Dialectics means having a dialogue. Uh, This is over. Surplus was very important. Class was formed with the coming of the agriculture. This is over. So we have conflict at every stage. Well, the modern state is, committee of bourgeois. They are the capitalists, the money-minded people who are changing the policies of the government. Then there is a dream of classless society, or it is called philosophy of scientific socialism. Conflict that he says the state will wither away. This I have explained. With the coming of the scientific socialism, there will be hardly any need of any state machinery, as there will be everybody will be equal and there will be peace. Well, now this Marx theorization, though very important and has influenced the world for a very long period, it had certain flaws. For example, behind every action, at the root of every action, there is an economic reason. Seems to be a bit one-sided. Like I gave you an example in my last class, I remember. I do come for teaching to university, and definitely if the university stops giving me salary, I may not come at all. I'll start because I have to live. I am a human being. I have to live in this society. I need food. I need to buy books. I need to buy clothes. Well, so but is the only money is the only reason that I'm coming to the class and coming to the university? Probably not. I love teaching. I love spending time with the books, and that is the reason I left my earlier job as an engineer in the Air Force and become a teacher. So there could be, multiple reasons behind the one action. Human nature is pretty complex. You just can't, this seems to be a kind of oversimplification, and that is the reason Marx had been criticized by some of the historians that Marx have already decided what he wants to prove, and in order to prove his theory, he picked up certain evidences from history. It is not an objective, rational all comprehensive analysis of human behavior. Uh, Karl Marx says that thoughts are determined by the economical condition, but it could be other way around as well. Like, if the economical condition is the only determining factor, then we don't see that in life. For example, if in a village, if father is having 10 acre of land and if he gives 5 acre and if he's having two sons and if he divides the land at the time of his death and give five acres to each of his son, after 20 years, not necessary that they both will be equal, even though they got equal land. It's quite possible that one brother, because of his positive thinking and hard work, has worked very hard and have better educated children, and his condition will be much better than the other brother, who probably, I wish it should not happen with anybody, who probably had certain bad habits of drinking and did not cultivate his land properly, could did not pay attention to the education of his children. So it is a thought also, which can also play an important role in shaping human life as well as shaping human history. Uh, Well, according to Karl Marx, it is a revolution that will bring the change, but we don't see it in all the history of all the countries. Sometimes the gradual changes also brings a lot of important changes, like it happened in case of England. England, the democracy came very slowly. So revolution, fine, okay, but not necessary. It is a reform that can also bring gradual changes. The workers of the world will be united and they will be in the forefront of the revolution. It did not work out. For example, he believed that all the governments are in the world are protecting the bourgeois class. But in the case of the First World War and the Second World War, we see that the worker of Russia, they supported their own government, and the worker of Germany, they supported their own government. It is not happened that the worker of Germany and the worker of Russia, they united together. It's not possible. Nationalism, apart from the class consciousness, is an important factor that determines your behavior. He did not he sees the society only into the two classes, capitalists and workers, but there is a middle class as well, which plays a very important role. Karl Marx completely ignores it. The capitalists, though it was an exploitative system, but then over a period of time, because of resistance, the capitalists have changed. Now we have fixed working hour in factory, 8 hours is maximum. We people are given Sunday, now even Saturday, Sunday, both days are holiday. There is something called corporate social responsibility. Capitalists, not necessary that they are just out there like foxes who will exploit the people. They do have certain responsibility. Recently, Bajaj company has given a lot of money to our university, and out of that money, this new administrative building has come into existence. So, human personality is not only one dimensional. We don't always think about money. For example, do I love my son only with the thought that when he grow up, he will earn money and give it back to me? Or I just feel like loving my son. It's quite possible that, so Karl Marx seems to be completely ignoring that. Revolution that Karl Marx have predicted all over the country did not really happen. He also predicted that it will be the worker in the factories who will be leading the revolution. But in case of communist revolution in China, it was mostly led by the peasant. As this I have already said, A.J.P. Taylor, the British historian, he said that Marx have already decided what he want to discover. It is not an objective analysis. But nevertheless, in spite of by one-sided theorization, historical events are very cleverly, conveniently used to illustrate the unfolding of Marxist theory that there is a class conflict, there is an exploitation sphere, and so forth. So we will be summing up now. According to Marx, there is an economic reason behind all the event. At every stages of the society, there is a class conflict. But Marx, though he often criticized, he does have a very important place because he drew attention to the exploitation. It is because of, if we can't give entire credit to Marx, but Marx do deserve the credit that he brought into the limelight the problems that is faced by the poor people, the problem that is faced by the exploited class. And he gave us new tools, new perspective to understand history, that there is an economic reason, there is a class struggle, the institutions have come into existence for the protecting the interests of the bourgeois class. And these are the definitely very important tool. But as you know, Didi Kosumbi, one of the very important Marxists, said that the Marxism is a good tool. It cannot be a substitute for an intellect. We need to use your intellect, and the Marxist theory or positivists or annals that we'll be studying next, all this theory can be an important tool which will sharpen your perception of history. But we should not be a blind follower of any theory. That is what the purpose of studying historiography is, that you become a kind of objective analyzer, objective impartial student of history. So here I'm stopping. If you are having any question, you can